Hi there and good afternoon. This is going to be Paranormal Investigation Stories number 15. If you remember yesterday we left it off with the first ever investigation at RAF Holmpton in East Yorkshire. That was with a group called Spiritual Renaissance. This time when we went to RAF Holmpton, it was a completely different group altogether. It was a group who didn't have anything to prove. It was a group who were of one mind, and more importantly than anything, there were no paying members of the public. So nobody was expected to put on a show. We all knew what to expect, and it was a really good night. So from this standpoint, I would like to first of all say thank you to the people who went. Carrie, Ben, Kelly, Charly, Jordan, Katie, Micky Dredd, David, Julie, Sarah, Peter and Ellie. All these people are from varying different areas. I myself at the time was from Huddersfield, Peter was from Heddon, Ellie was from Hull, Carrie and Ben and Kelly were from Hickman White Dewsbury area, Sarah and Julie were from Barnsley in South Yorkshire. I think Kat and Micky Dredd were from Wakefield, and David again from the Wakefield area. There were another couple there who I think were Mel and Tracey, and they came from the Pontefract area. So we were all quite a mixed bag, and we were people who have been interested in the paranormal and have dealt with the paranormal before. There was also another couple turned up who I cannot remember the name, but they'd obviously left their home in a bad mood because they continued to have kind of a domestic argument all through the night, to be fair. And this one in particular, every time Katie walked into a room within the building, she would say, "Ooh, I'm sensing a dark spirit in here," which is quite comical really, and also very sad. Anyhow, we got to the bunker after meeting in a pub. We all had a drink, sorted out where we were going, gave the instructions to those who had never been before, and we made our way to RAF Holmpton, Rhizome Lane, Withensea. On arrival there at 9 o'clock we were greeted again by the Brigadier, James Fox. James was a lovely guy, and he gave everyone the talk of how the bunker was built, why the bunker was built, a brief history on the people who worked there, etc, etc. And we all made our way down the steps. Those of us who have been there before knew what to expect, while others were not quite sure what to expect. I remember David in particular, he had turned up in so much outdoor clothing because he thought that the bunker would be cold and damp, similar to a pillbox I suppose that you find on the East Coast. But it was always very, very warm under there, very humid. Anyway, we walked down the long corridor again towards the rubber doors. And going through the rubber doors we entered again into this vast area, really vast area. The area where the hoist was, and this hoist had been used in the past to actually hoist a dead person from the bowels of the building. And the reason this needed doing because he was too heavy, much too big a guy for anybody to try and lift and get out of the building. Anyhow, we were on there and we were wandering around and we came across the first aid, the hospital room. And while we were in the hospital room, we all sat down in various places. And Charly, who is a lady by the way, and she has mediumistic ability, she began to pick up on the spirit of a wounded RAF man who was in the bed. And they seemed to be having quite a good talk. And this RAF spirit showed signs that he was a bit concerned about the amount of people that were down there and the amount of people that were in the actual hospital room. On saying this, the atmosphere in the room dropped, became much denser, and I suppose a heavy feeling fell upon us. And it was at this point where Ben was floored. He just absolutely passed out and went flat on the floor. And Ben is a big lad, young and strong, but it was as though the spirit had overtaken him, and he was there on the floor, unconscious. He wasn't unconscious for long, because a lot of the people who were there, we all had nursing experience to some extent. We all had worked in the care industry in varying roles. We brought Ben round and we spoke to him, and he said he really had no idea what had happened. He was there 1 minute stood, and the next minute he was there on the floor. There was no permanent damage to him, no injuries that we could see. And Charly continued talking to this spirit and asking the spirit if he had actually done that to Ben. And I don't think, if I remember rightly, he responded to that one. But we all felt sure that the negative energy and the heaviness was being brought in by this spirit. We left that building, part of the building, and we went into what is now like a cafe area. And while we were in the cafe area, we decided to get the Ouija boards out. There were 3 tables and 3 Ouija boards. And we did get some quite compelling evidence from the Ouija boards. Certain names were spelt out, times, dates, etc., etc. And some dates that you couldn't, they were undeniable, that they were part of the history of that building. However, on saying this, some of the areas that were spelt out were completely different. Following this, we went back upstairs and we spoke to James, the brigadier, and we asked him about various parts of the building and also the exhibits which were in the building. And from what James told us, that a lot of the equipment and exhibits that were in the museum part had been gleaned from quite a few different RAF bases all over the United Kingdom, which of course brought to light that certain objects had certain spirits attached to them, spirits which didn't belong in RAF Holmpton, but they did belong to, for an example, the beds, the hospital beds, the equipment that was being used. It had all been used, but a lot of it in different parts of the country. So that solved the problem there. We went downstairs and we entered again into the bomb room, which I mentioned yesterday. There with the sarcophagus-shaped chest, which has the nuclear bomb, for want of a better word, a warhead, which is in there and could be ready for use, according to James, within 20 minutes, should they get an alarm. Whilst I was in there, there were several people who said that they could see shadows. There were a certain amount of orbs taken on the photos, etc. And it was in this building where I felt a distinct hand on my shoulder. And the hand on my shoulder experience was happening around, it was like a large motor, generator type thing. And it is this point, this generator, where this big guy had been found dead, where he'd had the heart attack, the guy who had to be hoisted. So I was obviously picking up on his spirit, and he was touching my shoulder. From there we went down into the theatre again. It was quite a big area, and there were a few of us sat in there, and we were calling out, asking, is there anybody here? Can you make a noise? Can you touch one of us? And it was at this point that Julie's friend Sarah broke down in tears. And the reason that she was in tears was because something completely different and something completely away from this investigation was affecting her. Apparently in her life Sarah had lost a couple of children. I don't know personally whether this was through stillbirth or whether they had died in infancy. She was inconsolable for quite a while, and I can remember Katie, or Kat as we call her, just hugging her and patting her on the back, and the tears were flowing freely. And it was a very touching, very moving moment. At that point David seemed to just disappear from our view. I assumed that he'd gone off to investigate somewhere else, or maybe go back up onto the ground level to have a cigarette, to get a breath of fresh air, whatever. From there we went into the communications room, where there was a huge pit with a world map on, and the rakes, like a croupier stick, the ones that were used for pushing the aeroplanes about when they were playing the war games, when they were plotting the position of the aeroplanes of the enemy and of course our own. And while we were in there we turned out the light, and again we called out, is there anybody here? Is anybody with us? Can you please make a noise? And it was at this point where the couple I've mentioned earlier, who seemed to be having a domestic argument with each other, the gentleman became possessed, and he became quite aggressive, and it took several of us to take him to the ground and to calm him before being able to take him out of the room. The funny thing is, he was an unbeliever. He was a total sceptic up to that point. But of course, after becoming possessed, he changed his opinions altogether, and he became much more respectful and much more aware of the things going on around him. It was also at this point that his wife, who was also quite a argumentative and strange character, heard a voice whisper in her ear saying, "Please help me." And again this absolutely freaked her out, totally freaked her out. We seemed to be able to find there was an orb, and it was not far from the communications pit, and it seemed to move to command. This orb, glowing bright, and it would just move around, and it seemed to follow all the way around the building, all the way around the people who were gathered. Not just once or twice, it would continue to do so. And on asking James again later on, he said that this particular orb, which seemed to be a sentient energy, had actually become a feature now of the bunker. and it was there constantly and would appear to command, which is fascinating, absolutely fascinating. And we wonder now if this is the spirit within this orb who was asking for help. We did find out later that someone had actually died within that room when they were doing an exercise for a chemical gas attack, and he had actually died during this exercise. And of course, the military being the military, everything was covered up and swept under the carpet, and it was said that he had died of natural causes, when in effect he had actually died as part of an exercise within the bunker. We decided to have a break from there. We went up to see James, had a quick chat with him about things that we'd witnessed, things that we'd heard, and following that we went back downstairs again. And some people wanted to enter the hospital room again, where Ben had collapsed under whatever oppression by this spirit. We opened the door. One of the girls, and I can't remember who it was, but they flashed the torch around and let out this huge scream. Because right there in the corner of the room, and it was something we all saw, there was a figure sat in the chair next to a medical trolley which had all the equipment on, and this figure appeared to be groaning. So the light was switched off, people came out, some went back in and flashed, and this figure was still there. And then all of a sudden some of us heard it snore, and it was David. When he had left us down in the theatre, he was a little bit tired, so he decided to go up into the hospital room to get some peace and quiet. So there he was, the ghost of the hospital room, in all his glory, snoring away. That was a funny experience. So well done, David. You certainly gave people a fright that night. And that wasn't the end. From there we continued to walk around the building again, and we went into the dormitory. And again the dormitory was a mixture of beds from various RAF bases, and we were picking up on certain spirits in there who, some were attached to the equipment, some were there purely as residual energy, bearing in mind that 14,000 people had worked within that bunker in its operational life. From that point, we went again along the corridor towards a private area where the public weren't allowed access to, because within this area was still the operational base. Anyhow, at the end of this corridor there was a double swing door, went to a landing way, up some stairs and back onto the top floor, and across the landing way was the other door into the private area. And as we were walking down that corridor, both Julie and Sarah, the girls from Barnsley, let out a scream, and they took a photograph. And in this photograph, and it's a photograph I'll never forget, and if any of you who watch this have still got that photograph, I would love to see it again. And it was the head of a man, very clear, looking straight through that door, down the corridor, towards us. It was a very scary experience. During the night we'd left cameras running in the bomb room, we'd left cameras running in the upper corridors, We'd also left cameras running in the main corridor leading down from the entrance. And on checking the footage, there were lots of orbs were seen, clearly moving up the corridors. There were a couple of parts where we could swear that we all heard footsteps, which were within the main building, not in the corridor. And there were a few shadows, which we cannot explain. We kept hearing a clicking noise, but we found out that that was purely the air conditioning system that kept going on and off. But there were also points, when we look back, when the camera, which was firmly stood on a tripod, kept shaking. And there was nobody else around in that area at the time, absolutely nobody. We also heard what appeared to be muffled whispers, again coming from behind the camera, unfortunately, rather than in front. Time was drawing to a close, and we decided one last time to look into the dormitory where all the beds were. And as soon as we opened the door, flashed the lights, there was a very loud snoring sound coming again from within. And bless him, there was David once again, flat out without a care in the world, just enjoying being with the spirits of RAF Holmpton. And again, it scared some people. Give them a shock, but it's always good to have a bit of humour within the investigations. We all went back up. We thanked James for his time. We all got in our cars and we departed for the long journeys back to our hometowns. And we kept in contact in fact, we're still in contact to this day, all of us. And we would love to do another investigation again very soon. But as I said, it's impossible now at RAF Holmpton because of people stealing things, which is a disgrace, as I said yesterday. The next one I upload will be again at RAF Holmpton, but this one will include 2 investigations, one with a group of people and one which was just me and Ben, the lad who was floored by the spirit. And that one in which me and Ben did, we did find quite a lot of evidence of the existence of the spirit world and the continuation of life after death. And I look forward to sharing that one with you. And thank you again so much for listening to my ramblings. Love and peace to you all. Namaste. Stay safe and stay well.